The world stage is constantly shifting, with numerous significant events unfolding globally. Today, we delve into a particularly concerning trend impacting American citizens abroad. There was a time when the red carpet seemed perpetually rolled out for Americans across the globe, a symbol of influence, opportunity, and welcome. Now, however, that welcome mat is being decisively rolled up in numerous nations. It's a stark reversal, a signal that the dynamics of international relations are undergoing a profound transformation. One after another, influential countries are closing their doors, abrogating long-standing agreements, and compelling United States citizens to leave. This isn't a minor shift. It represents a significant geopolitical tremor with far-reaching implications for travel, business, diplomacy, and the very perception of American influence worldwide. Why this abrupt surge in hostility? What forces are driving this change? Is the root cause found in the complex interplay of international politics, a raw struggle for power, or perhaps a calculated form of payback for past grievances or policies? The answers are likely multifaceted, woven into the intricate fabric of global affairs. From abrupt military withdrawals demanded by host nations to widespread visa denials and outright bans, a substantial pattern is emerging. Americans, once often seen as privileged travelers or essential partners, are increasingly finding themselves caught in the crossfire of these international disputes. It's crucial to understand that these actions aren't primarily originating from failed states or marginalized regimes clinging to power. On the contrary, these are established global players, nations with significant economic and political weight, making deliberate and bold moves that directly affect U.S. citizens. They are signaling a shift in alliances, priorities, and perhaps a decline in the perceived indispensability of American partnership or presence. If you've ever believed your American passport was an all-access pass, a golden ticket guaranteeing entry and favorable treatment almost anywhere, it's time to reconsider that assumption. The ground rules are changing rapidly. Let's investigate the 10 key countries that are actively expelling Americans or making their presence increasingly untenable, and explore what these developments signify for the future of American citizens navigating an increasingly complex and sometimes unwelcoming world. Understanding these shifts is vital, not just for travelers, but for anyone interested in the evolving landscape of global power dynamics. We encourage you to subscribe to our channel and hit the like button. Your support is incredibly important for helping us continue to bring you in-depth analysis like this. Also, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. It's always fascinating to see our global audience. Stay tuned, as we'll be drawing some important conclusions at the end of this video about what this all means. Something unexpected occurred in Africa, an event that seemed to catch the Pentagon entirely by surprise, highlighting the rapidly changing geopolitical landscape on the continent. Niger, a nation previously considered a key U.S. ally in the Sahel region, abruptly informed United States forces that their time was up. They were told, in no uncertain terms, to pack their bags and depart the country. This directive was stunning. Niger, the very country that had previously welcomed over 1,000 American troops onto its soil for critical counterterrorism operations aimed at combating extremist groups like Boko Haram and affiliates of ISIS and Al-Qaeda, was now dramatically tearing up the established playbook. The U.S. had invested heavily in Niger, building drone bases and training local forces, viewing the nation as a linchpin in its regional security strategy. This sudden reversal signifies a major rupture in that relationship. What precipitated this drastic shift? The answer lies in a confluence of factors. Significant power shifts within Niger following a military coup in July 2023, the formation of new regional alliances potentially less aligned with Western interests, and a burgeoning skepticism across parts of Africa regarding the long-term presence and effectiveness of foreign military footprints. Many in the region question the benefits versus the perceived costs, both political and social, of hosting foreign troops. In March 2024, Niger's military government, which seized power the previous year, officially revoked a long-standing military cooperation agreement with the United States. This wasn't just a request to leave. It was a formal declaration deeming the U.S. military presence illegal under the new governing authority. You would be genuinely shocked at the speed with which these diplomatic and military ties unraveled. Years of cooperation and strategic partnership evaporated seemingly overnight, leaving Washington scrambling to reassess its strategy in a volatile region. What's particularly wild about this situation is that Niger isn't a country technically at war with America. This isn't about direct conflict, but rather a potent signal that American influence is waning, even in regions once considered securely within its sphere of strategic importance. The ease with which the welcome mat was pulled underscores a vulnerability. Consider the implications. If one nation, previously a close partner, can shut the door so swiftly and decisively, who might be next? Are other U.S. bases and military agreements around the globe, particularly those reliant on the goodwill of host governments, suddenly at risk of similar evictions? This isn't just about Niger. It's a potential harbinger of broader changes in how nations perceive and interact with the United States military presence. We're only just beginning to explore this trend, and the next country on our list presents an even more powerful example of this shifting dynamic, demonstrating a deliberate and calculated effort to show Americans the exit. Please make sure to watch this video until the end, as we'll be summarizing the key takeaways and offering our concluding thoughts on this significant global trend. The warning signs regarding Russia were accumulating for some time, visible to those closely monitoring the relationship between Moscow and Washington. Stricter visa requirements were implemented, making it more difficult for Americans to enter and stay in the country. Consulates were closed, reducing diplomatic access and services for citizens abroad. A tit-for-tat exchange of sanctions escalated, creating an atmosphere of increasing friction and unpredictability. These weren't isolated incidents, but part of a pattern indicating a deteriorating relationship long before the major geopolitical shifts of recent years. However, in 2023, and particularly intensifying into 2024, Russia made its stance unmistakably clear. The era of relatively open access for Americans was definitively over. The message conveyed was that Americans are no longer welcome in the same manner they once were, reflecting a deep chill in bilateral relations. This shift manifested in concrete actions. Journalists found themselves detained on charges viewed by many Western observers as politically motivated. Diplomats were expelled, further straining official channels of communication. Non-governmental organizations, NGOs, with any perceived ties to the United States, were systematically banned, labeled as foreign agents or undesirable organizations, effectively silencing voices and cutting off avenues of civil society cooperation. You might be tempted to think this resembles a return to the Cold War, a Cold War 2.0. While there are echoes of that era's tensions, the current situation is arguably more complex, layered with modern geopolitical rivalries, economic pressures, and unresolved historical grievances. The direct impact on American citizens has been significant and concerning. You might be surprised to learn the extent of the earlier measures. Russia had already drastically slashed the American diplomatic staff allowed in the country by over 700 personnel back in 2017, a major move that significantly hampered consular services even then. But guess what? Things have only continued to escalate since. Today, Americans traveling to Russia, whether for tourism, business, or personal reasons, face a level of scrutiny far exceeding that of previous years. Even casual tourists report being subjected to detailed questioning upon arrival, a clear indicator of the heightened suspicion. Why the continually rising tensions? The factors are manifold. Deep-seated political disagreements, global power plays involving alliances and influence, the ongoing conflict in Ukraine serving as a major catalyst, and retaliatory measures for Western sanctions. Perhaps. But the truly alarming aspect is the sheer rapidity with which these changes are occurring, and the implications for America's standing on the global stage. The ease with which access can be restricted, and the welcome withdrawn, serves as a stark reminder of the fragility of international relations and the direct consequences for ordinary citizens when diplomacy fails. The real concern now is how quickly these shifts are solidifying, and what message it sends about America's global position. Before we continue to the next major player demonstrating this trend, we'd greatly appreciate it if you could hit that subscribe button. Supporting our channel allows us to keep bringing you the kind of eye-opening, fact-based, and urgent content that the mainstream often overlooks. Your subscription helps us delve deeper into these critical global shifts. Now, what if one of America's most significant trading partners, a nation deeply intertwined with the U.S. economy, quietly transformed into one of its most challenging hosts? Coming up next is a country that historically hosted thousands upon thousands of U.S. businesses, students pursuing education, and leisure travelers exploring its vast landscapes and ancient culture. But the atmosphere has changed dramatically. Now, Americans within its borders are increasingly being watched, their activities restricted, and, in some deeply concerning cases, detained without clear cause or due process. This significant shift didn't materialize overnight, but the extent to which things have progressed, often under the radar of casual observers, would shock many. You'd be stunned by how far relations have deteriorated beneath the surface of economic interdependence. What catalyzed this change? Why are prominent tech executives and seasoned journalists now reconsidering or canceling trips to this global powerhouse, a destination once seen as essential for business and reporting? And why are established American schools and major companies shutting down their offices there in droves, pulling back from decades of investment and presence? Get ready, because the next country on our list isn't just powerful in terms of economic might. Its influence is pervasive, affecting global supply chains, technology standards, and international politics on a scale that touches everyone, directly or indirectly. The changes occurring here have profound implications for the global order. Stay tuned as we unpack the complex situation in China. Number 8. China. It once represented a land of immense opportunity for Americans. Global businesses flocked there, establishing vast manufacturing operations and tapping into its enormous consumer market. Top universities attracted American students seeking world-class education and cultural immersion. The connections seemed endless, fostering decades of economic and academic exchange. But China has fundamentally altered the rules of engagement. You would be genuinely shocked at how rapidly the once welcoming environment has transformed into something far more cautious, even adversarial, for U.S. citizens. The welcome mat hasn't just been pulled. In some ways, it feels like it's been replaced by a field of red flags. What once felt like an open invitation for partnership and exploration is now heavily layered with suspicion, pervasive surveillance, and abrupt, often opaque restrictions targeting Americans. And it's crucial to understand this isn't merely affecting tourists. We are talking about seasoned professors facing unexpected hurdles, high-level CEOs encountering new business barriers, students finding exchange programs curtailed, and even accredited journalists facing increased scrutiny and limitations on their reporting. The shift didn't occur in a vacuum. Over the last several years, particularly escalating through 2023 and 2024, U.S.-China relations have become severely strained. Tensions over trade, technology, human rights, Taiwan, and regional influence have reached a point where simply possessing an American passport can place you under the microscope upon arrival or during your stay. Major American corporations like Microsoft and its subsidiary LinkedIn have significantly reduced their operational footprint in China, citing the increasingly challenging regulatory and political environment. Educational exchange programs, once a cornerstone of bilateral understanding, have been dramatically cut back or suspended. More alarmingly, some U.S. citizens, including business executives and those with dual nationality, have been barred from leaving the country, placed under ambiguous exit bans without clear explanation or legal recourse. Yes, you heard that correctly. Exit bans, trapping individuals within the country's borders indefinitely. Why this dramatic change? Officially, the narrative often revolves around national security concerns and the need to counter foreign interference. Unofficially, analysts point to a growing strategic rivalry, deep-seated mistrust fueled by political rhetoric on both sides, and a tit-for-tat response to U.S. policies. Americans are increasingly viewed not as individuals, but through a geopolitical lens, perceived as potential agents or representatives of U.S. government interests. Ask yourself this critical question. If someone studying abroad, engaged in academic pursuits, can suddenly face intense questioning or restrictions. What does that mean? If a business executive can be held indefinitely due to a commercial dispute escalating into a political issue, what signal does that send? What does this imply for everyday American travelers, those engaged in legitimate business, or individuals simply visiting family members? And here's perhaps the wildest, most insidious part. Many of these changes are implemented subtly, quietly, often undeclared until an individual finds themselves directly impacted. They are underrated threats that manifest suddenly. Americans in China now contend with heightened digital surveillance, more rigorous visa scrutiny making entry and stay more complex, and tightening limitations on work and business opportunities. Even cultural exchange, once encouraged, is now viewed with suspicion. Yet despite this chilling atmosphere, China remains profoundly interconnected with the U.S. economy through trade and investment. So, what happens when geopolitical tensions soar, but the deep economic ties persist? Are we witnessing the early stages of a complete decoupling, a shutting down of decades of interaction? Or is this a calculated warning shot, a strategic power play? This isn't Cold War nostalgia or drama. It's the real, complex, and currently unfolding reality of navigating relations with a global superpower where the rules for Americans are changing fast. And if you thought that situation was intense, characterized by suspicion and restriction under the guise of national security, wait until you hear about what's happening just across the Middle East. The next country on our list has taken an even more personal, often confrontational, turn in its dealings with Americans, where the lines between citizen and state representative are deliberately blurred, and the risks can escalate dramatically without warning. Number 7. Iran. For decades, the relationship between the United States and Iran has been fraught with tension, marked by political upheaval, diplomatic standoffs, and deep ideological divides. For Americans, entering Iran carries risks unlike almost anywhere else. There are no official warnings needed to understand the potential danger. The history speaks for itself. There are no second chances if you fall afoul of the authorities, and sometimes, tragically, there is no way out once detained. This next country has long been a complex and often volatile player in global politics, particularly concerning its relationship with the West. In recent years, however, its stance toward Americans has hardened significantly, moving beyond political rhetoric into actions that directly endanger U.S. citizens. We are talking about Iran. Now, you might already anticipate a certain level of tension given the historical context. But what you may not fully grasp is just how perilous it has become for any U.S. citizen to set foot on Iranian soil. You would be shocked to learn how many Americans, often including dual nationals, have been detained on unclear or fabricated charges, frequently held without trial, sometimes for years, used as pawns in political negotiations. It's not just high-profile cases involving journalists or academics that make the news. Regular travelers, dual citizens visiting family, and humanitarian workers providing essential aid have all found themselves ensnared in situations that spiral from routine visits into terrifying ordeals in mere moments. The U.S. State Department maintains its highest-level warning, a Level 4, Do Not Travel Advisory, for Iran. This isn't a suggestion. It's the strongest possible caution, reflecting extreme risks. Why? The danger of arbitrary arrest and long-term detention is deemed exceptionally high. And crucially, once you are inside Iran, there is very little the U.S. government, lacking any diplomatic presence since 1980, can do to assist you. Think it couldn't happen to you, perhaps on a carefully planned trip or a family visit? Consider this. What if you were stopped at the airport, your devices searched, and your intentions questioned based on flimsy suspicions? What if you were questioned over something as seemingly innocuous as a social media post misinterpreted by authorities, or an accidental photograph taken near a sensitive location? And here's the deeper, more systemic issue. Americans aren't just viewed as individual visitors or professionals in Iran. They are often treated as direct extensions or representatives of U.S. government policy, regardless of their actual affiliations or purpose. This means that whatever political storm is brewing between Tehran and Washington, The repercussions can land squarely on the shoulders of any American citizen the moment they step into the country. Cultural ties, family visits, legitimate business ventures, all have been severely impacted or deemed too risky by many. American NGOs are effectively non-existent, often labeled as suspicious entities or fronts for espionage. Even journalists face extreme difficulty operating and risk detention under accusations of spying. Iran is a place rich with ancient history, vibrant culture, and immense national pride. But currently, it's also a place where Americans face some of the most acute risks on the planet. And that brings us back to the core issue. If global policies can shift so rapidly, and if citizens are increasingly treated as political pawns rather than individuals, how safe are Americans in other high-tension countries? The lines are blurring, and the consequences can be dire. Before we reveal the next, and perhaps the most extreme and isolating case on our list, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Your support helps us continue digging into the facts and bringing you these raw, real, and critical updates the world needs to hear, going beyond the headlines. You simply can't just walk into the next country on our list. And if you somehow did, perhaps inadvertently or through a highly restricted channel, you might never walk out again. This next nation is arguably one of the most secretive, heavily controlled, and isolated places on Earth. For Americans, it represents a legal and political minefield where the rules are opaque, rights are non-existent by Western standards, and the consequences of any perceived misstep can be catastrophic. Coming up is a place where one wrong move, one misunderstood gesture, could indeed mean lengthy imprisonment under brutal conditions, becoming a tool for state propaganda, or potentially worse. You are not going to want to miss what's next as we examine North Korea. Number 6. North Korea. You won't find this destination featured on glossy travel blogs or discussed in casual conversations about vacation plans. For American citizens, North Korea arguably represents the most dangerous and inaccessible destination on Earth. The country maintains no diplomatic relations with the United States. There is no U.S. embassy to provide assistance, no diplomatic safety net whatsoever. Once you are inside its borders, you are entirely at the mercy of a regime known for its opacity, authoritarian control, and deep hostility towards the United States. You'd be shocked, though perhaps not surprised, how many people underestimate the risks until it's far too late, even if entry were easily possible, which it is not. American tourists, in the rare instances they have gained entry through specialized, highly restricted tours in the past, have been detained over the smallest perceived infractions, taking unauthorized photographs, possessing restricted materials, which can include religious texts or even certain media, removing a political poster as a souvenir, or saying the wrong word interpreted as disrespectful to the regime or its leadership. In one tragically high-profile case, Otto Warmbier, a U.S. student visiting on an organized tour, was arrested and sentenced to 15 years of hard labor for allegedly attempting to steal a propaganda banner from his hotel. He was eventually returned to the U.S. in a comatose state and died shortly thereafter, never having regained consciousness. He never made it back alive in any meaningful sense. Following this and other incidents, the U.S. government has implemented a geographical travel restriction. Since 2017, U.S. passports are legally invalid for travel to, in, or through North Korea without a special validation from the State Department, which is granted only under very limited circumstances, such as compelling humanitarian reasons or for specific journalistic assignments. And yet, even with these restrictions, the risks extend far beyond what's officially documented. What if you were accused of espionage simply for being American, without any evidence presented? What if you were coerced into making a public confession to crimes you didn't commit, broadcast on state-controlled television for propaganda purposes? What if your only crime, in the eyes of the regime, was holding a U.S. passport? And here's the part that many might overlook in hypothetical scenarios. You are not just being watched in North Korea. You are being followed, tracked, and tightly controlled by government minders from the moment you hypothetically land. You cannot move freely. You cannot speak freely without risking severe consequences. Every second you are potentially there, you are viewed as a potential pawn in a high-stakes global political game. think this is merely exaggeration or fear-mongering. North Korea has a long documented history of using detained foreign nationals, especially Americans, as leverage during tense diplomatic negotiations or international crises. Detentions become international headlines. Prisoners become bargaining chips in a dangerous geopolitical strategy. No one is suggesting you would ever want to attempt travel to North Korea under current conditions. But the reality is stark. If you were to somehow end up there, even potentially by accident, though highly unlikely, you might not get to choose when, or indeed if, you ever come back. Let that chilling reality sink in. Now, let's shift our focus to a country that was once a key NATO ally and a popular destination where East met West, but where the political climate for Americans has become increasingly complex and, at times, openly hostile. Number 5. Turkey. It used to be one of the most frequented countries on the planet, a crossroads of civilizations where Europe and Asia converged, attracting tourists by the millions with its rich history, stunning landscapes, and vibrant culture. Americans, in particular, often found Turkey a welcoming bridge between continents. However, in recent years, Turkey has undergone significant political shifts, and for Americans, the change in atmosphere is becoming hard to ignore. You would be genuinely surprised how many U.S. citizens, including journalists, academics, and even consular staff, have faced detention or legal challenges in Turkey. These actions are often linked not to breaking clear laws, but are based on suspicion, association with groups deemed problematic by the Turkish government, or broader political reasons related to U.S.-Turkey relations. One prominent case involved an American pastor, Andrew Brunson, who was held for nearly 2 years on espionage and terrorism-related charges that the U.S. government vehemently contested. His detention, widely seen as politically motivated, triggered a major diplomatic standoff between Ankara and Washington, involving sanctions and intense negotiations before his eventual release in 2018. But guess what? That wasn't an isolated incident that resolved all issues. Since then, several other journalists, local U.S. consulate employees, who are often Turkish citizens, aid workers, and even tourists, have faced questioning, surveillance, travel restrictions, or visa denials. The climate for U.S. citizens has undeniably become more uncertain and, in certain contexts, particularly near sensitive border areas or during periods of political tension, can feel openly hostile. The Turkish government has publicly accused various American-linked individuals and groups of supporting opposition movements or inciting unrest, fueling a narrative of political paranoia and suspicion towards Westerners, particularly Americans. As these political tensions between the two governments rise and fall, so does the level of scrutiny faced by U.S. citizens within Turkey. So here's the pertinent question. Can a nation that was once a close strategic ally and a friendly host suddenly become a place where Americans need to exercise extreme caution? What happens when a casual visit, academic research, or journalistic work can potentially turn into a legal nightmare based on shifting political winds? What if a country that once actively embraced American tourists and partnerships now views your presence with suspicion based on your nationality? Travel advisories from the U.S. State Department have consistently warned Americans to exercise increased caution in Turkey, highlighting risks related to terrorism and arbitrary detentions. While not the highest-level warning, it's not casual language. It signals serious potential risks that travelers need to be aware of. And if diplomatic ties were to fray further, the risks for Americans on the ground could potentially increase overnight, making travel even more precarious. So, think twice before assuming past friendliness guarantees future welcome. Because in this rapidly evolving geopolitical landscape, what was considered safe yesterday might find itself off-limits or fraught with unexpected dangers tomorrow. And before we move forward to the next country, where the situation has become even more volatile, make sure you hit subscribe and turn on those notifications. It really helps our channel continue delivering these real stories, grounded in truth, that most people might not hear about until it's too late. Now, imagine a nation rich in oil, politically intense, and rapidly unraveling into chaos. This next country once boasted deep economic and cultural ties to the U.S., with American companies heavily invested in its energy sector and citizens frequently traveling between the two nations. But now, Americans are being explicitly warned. Don't go. Coming up next, we examine a nation where diplomatic doors have slammed shut completely. The U.S. Embassy is closed, and American citizens are being pulled deeper into a dangerous game of political power struggles and state-sponsored hostility. Stay tuned. This one is truly eye-opening. Number 4. Venezuela. One moment you might be checking into your hotel in Caracas, perhaps for business related to the once booming oil industry or visiting family. The next, you could hypothetically find yourself on a government watch list, targeted due to your nationality. That's the chilling, albeit complex reality some Americans have reportedly faced or feared in Venezuela. Once a top oil exporter to the U.S. with deep commercial and personal ties, Venezuela has transformed under political turmoil and economic collapse into one of the most dangerous places on earth for American citizens. You would be shocked at just how fast and how completely things changed. The U.S. shut down its embassy operations in Caracas back in March 2019, citing deteriorating security conditions and the breakdown of diplomatic relations with the Maduro government, which the U.S. does not officially recognize. Why the closure? Grave safety concerns for personnel and the inability to provide adequate consular services. And now, with absolutely no consular support available on the ground, if anything happens to an American citizen there, detention, accident, medical emergency, you are entirely on your own. But the lack of an embassy is just the beginning of the risks. Americans, especially dual Venezuelan American citizens, or those working in sensitive sectors like media, humanitarian aid, or the energy industry, have faced arbitrary detentions, lengthy imprisonments, often without formal charges, and accusations of espionage or undermining the state. These accusations are often vague, politically motivated, and the legal outcomes highly unpredictable in a system lacking judicial independence. The Maduro government has routinely accused U.S. nationals of being spies, conspirators attempting sabotage, or agents working to destabilize the country. Some detained Americans have been explicitly used as bargaining chips in political negotiations between Caracas and Washington. One wrong interaction with authorities, one photograph deemed suspicious, one misplaced comment interpreted as political dissent, and suddenly, an American could find themselves entangled in a much larger geopolitical crisis, with little hope of swift resolution. Think about that stark reality. A country known for its stunning natural landscapes, from Angel Falls to Caribbean beaches, its rich cultural heritage, and its historical deep American connections through oil and migration, is now effectively off-limits, deemed unstable, and deeply suspicious of U.S. citizens. You might ask, why would anyone even attempt to go there now? The reality is complex. Some Americans still have close family ties. Others might have residual business interests they feel compelled to address, or perhaps be involved in humanitarian missions attempting to alleviate the country's profound crisis. But for every person crossing the border, the risks are immense and growing daily. Venezuela suffers from rampant violent crime, severe shortages of food, medicine, and basic goods, hyperinflation that renders the currency almost worthless, frequent electricity blackouts, and a collapsed infrastructure. Amidst all this chaos, Americans stand out like beacons, easily identifiable targets. And in the wrong setting, being American is a dangerous liability. Venezuela isn't just diplomatically closed off to the U.S. The internal situation is volatile and perilous. The line between an ordinary visitor and a perceived political pawn is vanishingly thin and can shift without warning. Now, let's journey just a short distance across the Caribbean to an island nation whose relationship with the United States has been defined by decades of political tension, economic embargoes, and complex migration issues. Number 3. Cuba. You might think that a tropical island situated merely 90 miles from the coast of Florida would be a straightforward and accessible travel destination. However, for American citizens, a trip to Cuba comes with a significant number of strings attached, rooted in a long and often fraught history. The moment you mention traveling to Cuba as an American, you're stepping into a decades-long narrative of political standoff, economic sanctions, and deeply restricted travel regulations. You'd likely be surprised to know the full extent of the limitations. Officially, Americans are technically banned from engaging in pure tourism in Cuba. Yes, banned. You cannot simply book a beach vacation and go. To travel legally from the U.S., you must qualify under one of 12 specific categories authorized by the U.S. government, ranging from educational activities and professional research to family visits, religious activities, and humanitarian projects. Purely touristic travel is not permitted under U.S. law. But guess what? Even if your trip qualifies under one of these categories, the bureaucratic red tape doesn't end there. There are significant restrictions on where Americans can spend their money. Hotels, businesses, and even certain taxis linked to the Cuban military or intelligence services are often placed on a restricted list, meaning U.S. citizens are legally prohibited from patronizing them. Navigating this list can be complex, and one wrong booking or transaction could potentially land an American traveler in violation of U.S. sanctions laws upon their return. And what about the situation once you're actually in Cuba? While widespread detentions of ordinary American visitors are less common than in some other countries on this list, Americans are undoubtedly under watch. The Cuban government maintains a robust state security apparatus, and interactions with locals, particularly those critical of the government, can attract unwanted attention. Furthermore, there have been historical reports of unexplained health incidents affecting U.S. personnel stationed at the embassy in Havana, events that led to significant staff withdrawals and remain largely unresolved, adding another layer of caution. While the U.S. Embassy in Havana is currently operational, its services have been reduced at various times, and the overall relationship remains fragile. Access to reliable internet and communication can be challenging, and navigating the dual currency system, though recently reformed, adds complexity. Moreover, Cuba is still officially designated as a state sponsor of terrorism by the U.S. government. This designation triggers strict sanctions, financial restrictions, and maintains a constant underlying political tension that affects all aspects of the bilateral relationship, including travel. That means strict financial sanctions, banking restrictions, and a persistent cloud of political caution surrounding any American activity on the island. So, what might look like a simple Caribbean getaway could quickly unravel into a diplomatic maze. What if you are detained for questioning simply because you were meeting with independent journalists or activists? What if your carefully planned itinerary inadvertently includes a restricted entity? What if the island paradise, known for its classic cars, vibrant music, and resilient people, becomes a place where your American passport makes you a subject of suspicion or bureaucratic entanglement? This isn't a fictional movie plot. It's the real, current, and complex environment for Americans considering travel to Cuba. And as tensions remain, the inherent risks for Americans, especially those unaware of the intricate regulations and political sensitivities, are always present and could potentially escalate. Before we uncover our final 2 countries on this list, where the risks escalate even further, make sure to subscribe and activate notifications. It fuels our mission to bring you bold, factual, eye-opening content that goes way beyond the mainstream headlines, exploring the real risks and shifts happening around the globe. Now, picture a nation once viewed as a key center for U.S. military strategy and counter-terrorism efforts in a volatile region, now considered an absolute no-go zone. Number 2. Afghanistan. There are places where danger is an expected part of the landscape, but in Afghanistan today, danger doesn't just wait. It actively finds you. Afghanistan is now unequivocally a high-risk zone for Americans, arguably one of the most restrictive and perilous places on Earth for any U.S. citizen. Since the chaotic U.S. withdrawal and the subsequent Taliban takeover in August 2021, the entire structure of safety, security, and diplomatic support for American citizens has completely collapsed. The U.S. Embassy in Kabul is closed. There is absolutely no U.S. government presence on the ground to provide assistance. That means zero protection, zero consular assistance, and virtually no viable escape plan if things go wrong. And tragically, things can go wrong very quickly. You would be shocked, perhaps horrified, by how fast the situation can spiral out of control for any foreigner, especially an American. Even trusted routes, local contacts, and established safety protocols that existed before the withdrawal are no longer reliable or may not exist at all. The Taliban now exerts control over the country, and U.S. passports are viewed through an extremely dangerous political and ideological lens. Americans who remain in the country, perhaps due to prior commitments or inability to leave, or those who attempt to return for humanitarian work, journalistic endeavors, or personal family reasons, face an immediate and severe threat of violence, kidnapping, or arbitrary imprisonment by the Taliban or other extremist groups operating in the country. Ask yourself, would you willingly travel to a place where even the U.S. government explicitly states it cannot help you if you get into trouble? Afghanistan is no longer just a conflict zone. It's effectively a black hole for American safety and security. It's crucial to understand the gravity. This isn't just caution. The State Department maintains the highest level 4, do not travel advisory, strongly warning U.S. citizens against entering the country under any circumstances due to terrorism, civil unrest, kidnapping, and armed conflict. Finally, let's turn to our number 1 country, a nation in Eastern Europe that might not dominate daily news cycles like some others, but represents a rapidly chilling environment for Americans, deeply intertwined with the actions of its powerful neighbor. Number 1. Belarus. Blink, and you might miss just how quickly and concerningly things are unraveling here for U.S. citizens. This next country has quietly, but decisively, become one of the most hostile environments for Americans within Europe. Belarus may not always capture the headlines, but behind the scenes, its relationship with the United States has plummeted to new lows, largely mirroring the trajectory of its close ally, Russia. The government, led by Alexander Lukashenko, has significantly ramped up surveillance on foreigners, especially targeting those perceived to be linked to the West. And Americans? They are certainly no exception to this heightened scrutiny. With its strong political, economic, and military ties to Russia, Belarus has often mirrored Moscow's anti-Western policies and rhetoric. American diplomats have faced restrictions and expulsions. NGOs with Western funding or connections have been shut down or forced out. Journalists critical of the regime or investigating sensitive topics face questioning, detention, or denial of accreditation. And U.S. travelers, even those visiting for seemingly benign reasons, can face random searches, unexpected detentions, and intense interrogations, particularly if their activities raise any suspicion. Even peaceful visitors, perhaps unaware of the political undercurrents, are increasingly being treated with suspicion by authorities. You'd be surprised how easily a seemingly innocent action, a social media post critical of the government, a misunderstood comment overheard in public, or even staying in a hotel deemed suspicious by authorities, can raise red flags and lead to serious trouble. And if you are arrested or detained in Belarus, access to legal recourse or prompt consular assistance from the U.S. can be severely limited or delayed, given the strained diplomatic relations. Travel advisories now explicitly warn Americans to avoid Belarus entirely. The U.S. Embassy in Minsk has suspended operations, meaning there is no reliable consular support within the country. This isn't just a standard caution. It's an urgent red alert signaling extreme risks associated with arbitrary enforcement of laws, the risk of detention, and the country's support for Russia's actions in the region. We have just unveiled 10 powerful nations where American citizens are confronting escalating risks, hostility, or outright expulsion. These countries, ranging from former close allies to long-standing adversaries, are not just altering their visa policies or diplomatic stances. They are fundamentally reshaping the global landscape for U.S. citizens. The welcome mat, once a symbol of American influence and access, is being retracted, sometimes slowly and subtly, other times abruptly and decisively. From military commands being ordered out of strategic locations like Niger, to journalists and business people facing detention in Russia and China, to extreme travel bans and inherent dangers in places like Iran, North Korea, and Afghanistan, the trend is undeniable. Even in countries with historically strong ties like Turkey, Venezuela, or Cuba, the ground is shifting, making travel and presence more complex and precarious. Factors driving these changes are complex, including shifting geopolitical alliances, internal political dynamics, economic pressures, historical grievances, and direct responses to U.S. foreign policy. What remains consistent is the increased vulnerability of American citizens caught in the middle. The assumption that a U.S. passport guarantees safety and access is being challenged like never before. These developments signal not only potential difficulties for individual travelers, business people, and academics, but also reflect broader questions about the future of American influence and its place in a multipolar world where partnerships are constantly being reassessed. Staying informed about these risks and understanding the underlying causes is more critical than ever for navigating this changing global environment. Thank you for joining us on our channel for this crucial update. If you found this video eye-opening and informative, please make sure to subscribe to our channel. Give this video a thumbs up by hitting the like button and share it with your friends and network. Spreading the word helps more people understand the real risks, the underlying tensions, and the critical geopolitical shifts happening around the world right now. Don't forget to hit that notification bell as well, so you stay updated on our future videos, where we will continue to bring you the most shocking, dramatic, and thought-provoking content based on facts, not fiction. Thanks for watching. Stay safe, stay informed, and keep learning.